right, welcome to the show, the Doc and D Vaultcast. I'm D. With me, as always, is the Doc, Mr. Ken Rucci. Welcome, Ken.
Hello, and looking forward to getting started, Dennis.
Yeah, we've got an update to format based on some viewer feedback and listener feedback. We're going to try out some new format styles here, and actually, we're gonna start with our top of mind, which we've done in previous sessions, but Ken, I know, it's one of those things, and people have said, "Hey, why are you, doing this podcast and this video, like this video format and everything for the state and local government customers, and what drives you to do these types of things, and what are we working on?" And the first thing that for me is top of mind is this talk of zero trust. And if people said, "What do you do all day, every day?" I feel like you and I are in so many of these conversations in which we're talking about zero trust. And I know you feel very similar to me, but zero trust needs to be an absolute way of life for our SLG customers. And I know we both preach that our customers need to run, not walk, to the zero trust strategy. And I thought it was really timely just a few days ago at the very end of March that we published at aka.ms/zero trust. We've got a number of great bits of information there, but one of the things we published was this Examining Zero Trust, an executive roundtable discussion. It was an ebook with a number of different leaders where they talked about a bunch of zero trust strategies. And I know you and I are super passionate about this topic, and thought we'd just kick off talking about a couple things with that, and then jump into some news stories and meme of the month and some of those things. So, Ken, zero trust. You and I talk about it all day, every day,
Yeah,
and
and
there were 7 strategies listed there, and I thought we'd talk about a few of those.
yeah, no, I agree. I think it's interesting. When we talk to customers, some of the customers look at zero trust as, it's some kind of new phenomena that is just came out. Was launched a couple of months, and everybody seems to be talking about it. But really, zero trust is just a different way to approach a lot of the things that we've been doing already. And
Yep.
things like COVID and work from home have really shifted the way that we have to look at how we secure our systems. It's not, and I use this analogy all the time. It's not, everybody coming in the morning and logging into a domain connected workstation. They're coming in from all over the place, and because of the advancement of phishing attacks and social engineering, we have to really add another layer of authentication to ensure that you are who you are. And the way Microsoft is approaching it is from the identity perspective, right? Because that
Yeah, and
is
you're so right. In fact, strategy one for everybody who takes a look at that ebook,
right.
as you pointed out, it's use identities to control access. It starts with identities, and I find it really interesting. We have a lot of these conversations. Again, you and I team up a lot on these conversations, and I'm still surprised at how many customers that we interact with where this feels like it's still a new concept for them, where they're still looking at security in that mindset of, firewall is my moat, and I've created this, this separation between me and everyone else by using that firewall mindset. And strategy one is that use identities to control access. But
Absolutely.
even when you start to look at some of the additional strategies that are discussed in that ebook, you'll see this continuation of identities being a core theme through a number of them. Like strategy two is elevate authentication, and it talks about the need to incorporate multi-factor authentication, but also have that continuous authentication mindset. Like a lot of my customers, and I know because I hear you have some of these conversations, and you see them react when right now when their video is shared. It used to be when we were in the room with them. When we talk about things like continuous authentication, to continue to make sure that you should have privileges to see that thing that you're in at that moment in time. And there's those aha moments where it's not just, hey, turn on multi-factor and things are great. hey, an hour into your authentication session, should you still have access to those things that you're supposed to? It's really quite mind-boggling that some of these things have taken as long as they have to gain traction with our state and local government customers. But it's good to see that we're starting to get there at least.
Yeah, and the other piece, not only not only from the identity perspective, but you brought up a great point of kind of revalidating your access, because we don't know where you are logging in from. You may have started on your home Wi-Fi, which you consider secure, but then maybe you went out to doctor's office, or you went to an appointment, and you're connecting over another network. You're still logged in as you, but we still need to re-authenticate, and that's where these ideas that we talk about, things like conditional access. Let's look at the whole picture. Who are you? Where are you logging in from? What are you trying to access? And all of those concepts we roll up into that zero trust. And it's not a new idea, but it's just a new way of approaching things and taking advantage of the technologies that we have. And there's a lot
Yeah,
of
and
them.
I agree. And when you get into, some of the additional layers of the strategies, like moving into passwordless authentication, I chuckle sometimes because I hear you and we both bring up the topic of passwordless authentication. And sometimes we have that reaction from customers where it's like, oh, that's still too new, for what we're approaching. But when you start to look at the updates to the different security attestations and compliance and regulatory requirements our customers have, you get into scenarios where, like, these customers, they go through a process where they've got to keep up with the times, and they've got to get into these compliance requirements because of that, and they've got to think about passwordless because it's starting to be incorporated into some of those compliance requirements that exist out there too.
Yeah. And I also, I know we love talking about this. I want to just talk about strategy number 7 that's in that document is, define your roles and access controls. If that's one thing that, that we could take away is really look at all of the, all the roles that you have, and how do you put people into roles. And this is, definitely a lot easier than said than done, but everybody should have a basic role, and then we should layer on
Yep.
your authorizations and your access, and be diligent about it, right? I know, I tell customers, if you've been in an organization more than 5 years, typically you're probably carrying around a lot of things that you don't need anymore, but they just kind of happen.
Yeah.
That increases your attack surface if your credentials are compromised, and especially if you have some some administrative access, because that's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to get into your network and kind of see where all the good stuff is, and the less good stuff that you have is reduces that attack vector and makes it more secure. So I look at that too, right? Who has administrative access, and review that. We have ways now that we can automate those access reviews. Do you need domain access, domain administrator anymore, right? Maybe
Yeah.
so. There's a lot of good stuff that Dennis. Obviously,
Yeah.
that we could spend all day talking about this, but take a look
Yeah.
at that. It's common sense, but it's very well laid out, and the rationale is there to really help you move towards this new thing that's called zero trust, but it's not really new. It's been around.
Yeah, aka.ms/zero trust. It's a bunch of great info, but right on that page is that ebook that we just talked about. Really, really helpful, really valuable information. So Ken, let's talk some news.
Let's move into our next story. Yep. So this is I thought was a pretty interesting story that it kind of started with I'm Dennis. You're probably familiar with Duckduckgo. It's a
Mhm.
privacy search engine. It's kind of cool. It doesn't track anything. Well, they went after Google and wanted them to disclose or present all of the things that they track from your personalizations, what accesses do they need, and this idea came around, and I think it was Apple that said that they want a privacy nutritional label. right? So every time you install an app, you can go and look just like you would see how many calories and how much sodium is in a food, how much information is this application tracking. So it gives you some good awareness. Do you want to allow this? Do you want to not allow that? And Google finally published their nutritional labels, and you can go to the we'll publish the link, but you can go and take a look at it, and it's really interesting when you look at this information, and I think it highlights the fact that when we go to install an app, a lot of times we'll just kind of roll through. It's like, did you really read the software agreement? You go scroll through 5 times and you hit OK and you move on. Well, this is a little bit more serious than that, because these applications are tracking in the background. They want to have access to your camera, your microphone, and it's really not spelled out very easily. And the fact that we now have this concept of a privacy nutritional label is, I think, goes a long way to make people pay a little bit more attention and be aware of what's there.
Yeah, I have to say, I think it's a brilliant concept. I think it's something that, in general, it's ironically actually something I've started talking to customers about in general in terms of their approach to privacy policies. But it hits home a lot for me, as you said. I mean, a lot of us, we install something, you hit next, next, next. But as somebody who uses number of different iOS devices, and we have several in my household, I really did appreciate with the iOS 14 update, the apps basically having to tell users about the information they're collecting. And I know in a 14.5 update, it's actually going to require users' consent to do some of those things. But I, for example, have an autistic son, and for me, I want to know if this app that he's using is doing something that's tracking his usage or his activity on the device, because I'm a little bit more sensitive to how he might use that device. We use it as part of, his therapy and things like that. So there's a number of these applications that are quote unquote free out there. It's, if it's free, what is the provider getting out of it? And, these types of labels really make it helpful to understand what's going on behind the scenes in terms of that data collected. So I love that we brought out this story, but really is for our SLG customers, it's a useful way to start thinking about their approach to the way that they build applications and the way that they're collecting data, as well as, especially as a number of our customers are branching into creating mobile apps and creating new interfaces with the citizens they serve. It's really important for them to understand that they should be thinking about these things in that way as well.
Well, this also brings an interesting kind of intersection of where we are today, because we have applications and we have devices that we are using for work, right, and we're using it for our personal use. And I think that what we need to look at is, we're thinking about, this is my personal device, but if I am storing company data, right, on my iPad or my device, if that device is compromised, that data is still there. So we have this this kind of odd mixture now because of the way we're working, that we need to pay more attention to our privacy and what data is there. And I know we talk about ways that we can solve this, where we can virtualize different things and we can keep credentials separate. But for the most part, that seems to be more the exception than the rule. So, not a lot of good news there, but it's something that we need to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
okay. So let's jump into that next story, and this is an interesting one because it actually ties into kind of how we kicked the show off with, this article about this vengeful IT worker gets jail time for deleting their company's Microsoft user accounts and things like Office 365. And that it really ties back to, if you think of what we were talking about earlier, that zero trust concept. But here you've got a scenario in which, you've got a user that deletes almost, I think it was 1,200, 1,300 accounts.
Out of 36,000. And there were all the
addresses. Yeah. And it caused massive disruptions in a company's operations. This person, I mean, it's deleting those users didn't end up with, a slap on the wrist. I mean, this person got 2 years in prison, over a $500,000 fine included with that. Company basically stopped work for multiple days, and even after they started to get their users back online, they still had a significant effect to their business. And it comes back to that zero trust mindset of this person had elevated roles, elevated privileges inside the organization, and again, unfortunately, this person's performance affected their status with the company, and that turned into them being upset about that change in status. But boy, if this isn't a reminder about that mindset of zero trust, and I know that you and I have worked with customers in state and local government who have unfortunately dealt with some scenarios in which some resources have left employment
Yep.
and still either attempted or did in fact have an impact. So this isn't just something that affects businesses that are out there. This affects our state and local government customers, where those elevated roles that you were talking about, those elevated permissions, hang out there for far too long, and that continuous evaluation of users, would have played a significant role here.
Yeah, no doubt, and absolutely, thinking about that, that role, that management, right? It's, and there's got to be some process to that, right? After this person left, there should have been a process or something in place, maybe connecting with HR that says, when we delete his access, that everything else has to go. But yeah, what we're saying with this story is it just underpins the need for some of these things, and it's not easy, right? To go back and kind of retrofit if you've never done these type of policies or this analysis before. But it just, in stories like this, it just kind of rings true that, wow, somebody's mad, don't take away his access. They can
Yeah.
yeah, you said 2 days that this went on, but the story talks about the effects of this kind of lingered for a lot longer because it affected their external users, their vendors and consumers, and their calendar appointments, all of these things that you kind of just hadn't even thought about. But yeah, tragic, definitely.
Yep.
So okay, and kind of we'll just keep the happy news rolling through here. Our next story I think is kind of interesting. It's not really a news story, but I think it it fits in well with what we're talking about today. Is there was an article that that we found that went over kind of like I don't want to say greatest hits, but but cyber attacks in history, and it talked about kind of how they were implemented, and what's more interesting is how we could prevent those. And some of them are things that we've kind of lived through in the in the IT world, but it goes back to like 1999. If you remember the Melissa virus, that macro virus that targeted Word and Outlook, and kind of just spread damage throughout. But one of the the things that even back in 1999 was this concept of we have to protect our users from downloading random files or malicious files, because that was the way that they would get in, right? Now it's social engineering and spear phishing and help desk IT calls that want your password. But back in 1999, it was, hey, I got a file, I'm going to go and click on it. We really hadn't heard about this kind of thing before, and it just kind of took off. So that's just one example, Dennis. I know we
Yeah.
went through this and we talked about a couple of these.
Yeah, so what's funny is you talk about the Melissa virus as an example. I had just started working at the Attorney General's office in Pennsylvania, and in the first 10 days that I was at the Attorney General's office, we had a number of litigators who were hit with this email attack. And because it specifically targeted Word documents, those are like Word files were something they would be in constantly. And I just got thrown into the security fire. Like, it was immediate. jumping into that. But then I think back to, like one of the other call outs in there was the Heartland payment system, which, affected Visa and MasterCard, but it was rooted in those SQL injection attacks. And I think back to joining Microsoft, and when I joined Microsoft in 2007, and I was a SharePoint specialist, and SharePoint, when it's installed on premise, is installed on SQL. And I can remember the all hands on deck approach that we took to helping customers protect against and be prepared and understand the SQL injection attacks. And I had never heard of such things until, joining Microsoft. So it really is a walk down bad memory lane, if you will, of
It's a good way to put
of
it.
different viruses and attacks, because there's reference to WannaCry and things. But when you read, if you take the time to go through and look at some of these along the way, I hate to keep bringing up zero trust because it kind of ties into what we started the show with, but you see the root of this concept isn't, and things like zero trust isn't new. It's just, it's evolved as the attackers have evolved their attacks, and we've continued to evolve that strategy and try to create a more crystallized approach. But even back to, to that attack in 99, it's exactly like, again, it's rooted in focusing on the users. Even back then, it was still, let's get the user first. And, and if there was a strategy or capability to protect users back then, it would have, played a key role in all that too.
And the other key takeaway: patch your systems, right?
Oh my gosh.
That
Oh
is,
my gosh. Yeah.
keep them patched. You can only do so much, and we updates come out, apply them, get into a regular cadence of applying them, because I don't know how many kind of like post breach calls we've been on, and it all comes through that there was a patch that was released that hadn't been applied, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you know we could avoid a lot of pain and suffering if we just keep our systems up to date.
Well, Ken, it's funny you mentioned that, because the last story we wanted to talk about was this, is this article that came out. We actually published it on our Microsoft security blog, but it's this security signal studies is showing that firmware attacks are on the rise again, and Microsoft is one of many vendors who's working, to help protect against those. But in talking about those patching and things like that, you're starting to see that firmware and the OS kernel is starting to be that gap that's emerging in security, because we're working with customers to create this hardened approach, this zero trust model. And what we're seeing, and again, what this study seemed to bring to bear, is that because attackers are constantly trying to evolve, it's like, okay, maybe you're getting smarter and you're creating a zero trust approach, and maybe you're protecting the user a little bit more than you did before, and maybe you're segmenting the network in a way that you didn't before. So now, because of all these people who are working remotely and using, the current scenario with COVID as an example, let me see if I can attack the devices that people are using down at that kernel level. And I'm going to focus on attacking those devices, and then start my compromise and my attack chain there. And do things like physical attacks, which are things that you would expect are, far less common. Those are increasing. So
Yeah.
it's really, really good article. There's a lot of really good detailed information in there. And, again, I imagine most people who would, be listening to this, there's a lot of things that I didn't realize were on the rise in terms of firmware attacks, and there's some really valuable statistical information in there as well. But it extends, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much about it. It extends to all these new IoT devices. So you and I are talking to all these customers who are, as we start to create these plans to reopen, they're adding sensors into their environments. For example, they're counting how many people are entering a location, because maybe they've got a limit on the number of people who can be in a certain place at once. And these firmware attacks are attacking like the firmware that's on these IoT devices, or these devices that don't have a traditional full operating system. So it's really, really interesting. And as our customers are embracing these new different technological capabilities like IoT devices and sensor-based devices, some really, really useful information that's in this report.
Yeah, and the other thing that with this article that kind of got me kind of thinking is, man, who would have thought that physical access to a machine that usually was it's in a data center, right? It's behind a lock, but now with all of these different devices, and you mentioned IoT, all of these hardware devices are connected to maybe not secured networks. I mean, there's just different ways. I'm not going to go down and harden my refrigerator, but maybe it's something that you need to do, right? I mean, because physical
Well,
access to a box, it throws everything else out, right? If I can physically get to the machine, the firmware is just another way I can install something to open up a hole that I can exploit.
yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, I mean, when you first started talking, I was thinking, Thunder Spy, which is attacking like Thunderbolt ports, and people who are out and about. They're connecting to those, someone's USB-C port that's sitting out. But when you mentioned, like hardening your refrigerator, ironically, I just got a new fridge that is internet enabled, but I upgraded my home wireless network recently, and the device that I chose, I have a Netgear Orbi Pro. One of the reasons I made the decision I did is I have a dedicated IoT network because I've realized that is the biggest risk in my home environment. Is I have at any given moment I have 60 plus devices connected, and the volume of devices that are like my refrigerator, or I have a Dyson fan in my office that is internet connected. That's the hole in my security. So I chose updated networking equipment so I could create some security boundaries for my IoT devices because of articles like this that made me realize, man, I need to go back and look at my own, what I'm doing in my own home, let alone, again, to our point of bringing this up, what our customers are dealing with and their different locations.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I mean, there are things out there that we not even really worrying about, but it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
showing things that we need to worry about. So anyway, I think we are ready. Maybe let's lighten things up a little bit. And
yeah. Let's have a little fun here
yeah, so let's
with.
move to our meme. So this is
So,
very simple. But like it says, like Tony posted there. I appreciate the honesty. Yeah, I think we would, kind of just let us know, right?
yeah. Well, and if anybody is listening and not viewing, the image that's on the screen is a screen that says pick a password. Don't reuse your bank password because we didn't spend a lot on security for this application. And it's someone's tweet where they shared the image, and I think first of all, I think it's brilliant. But I mean, again, when you think about that guidance that we give to so many people when we talk about security, how many people, even in areas that hear us talk about these things all day, where when we talk to them and we'll have a conversation with fellow employees or other people who are in the world of security, and they're still using the same password for 87 different things. And you have that reminder, like, hey, when you talk about things like your bank and stuff like that, like, how much do you really need to keep that separate? So I love this because it just, first of all, it makes you laugh, but second, it kind of is a nice little security reminder as well. So
Well,
it
and
double dipped on this.
yeah. Well, I think the other thing in there is don't use your bank password. But how many of us are guilty of just, if you're not using a password manager, here's my secure password, here's my social media password. You just kind of reuse things, and it is what it is. So
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
funny. It calls out a couple of things, so I definitely thought it was worth including for
yeah,
this
for
month.
sure, for sure.
So let's kind of wind things down here with our last topic, which is our moment of Zen. And I really like this quote, Dennis. It just you need to stop and think about it. But it's from Clay Shirky, and it says it used to be expensive to make things public and cheap to make them private. Now it's expensive to make things private and cheap to make them public. Man, that is a Zen quote, but it hits home, right? If you think about it, right? When we first started our IT with our mainframes and our Commodore VIC-20s and everything that they or TI-99s if you really want to get into what I had, but everything was self-contained, right? I had my computer, I had my network, and if we wanted to open up an application back in the day, it was expensive. And now with the internet and everything being connected, it's a different philosophy. I got to pay a lot of money to make sure no one gets into these things. So.
Yeah, and it is so comical because to your point, like when I first got on computers, I had a 386 and a 486 DX2, man.
Oh, you had the math coprocessor. You were rich.
Yeah, yeah. But I think back to when I was a kid in Philly. My a friend of mine, Chris, and I, we joked that we invented the internet because we had, like, in war games, we had the old phone that you would put on and it would do the dialer, and we would connect, and it would take us an hour to have a 2-minute chat, back and forth with each other. But now, with the advent of social media and all the different platforms that exist, I mean, people share everything about everything, what they're eating, what they're doing, everything. And, it's almost impossible to go back and hit the undo button. There's no magic undo button that essentially removes all of you from, those platforms, because as a lot of people have said, the internet never seems to forget. But man, it's just, that moment of Zen. Gosh, it's so cheap and easy now to just get a domain name, start throwing your thoughts out there. My daughter has a blog, friends have, and it's just go out to GoDaddy and pay a few dollars. You get a domain name, and 2 seconds later, you're off and blogging and posting your thoughts to the world. So,
yep,
very, very poignant and kind of a fun topic to wind things down today. And
yeah, and I think I think on that, Dennis, I think we'll wrap things up. I hope everyone had a chance to go back and listen. Hopefully, you got something out of this, and you kind of like the new format.
Yeah,
please let us know. Please let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've the one format change that is coming is we've began to start inviting some guests who will be participating in some conversations with us. So we've got some really brilliant minds in the world of security are going to be jumping on in future conversations with us. So I can't wait for that, because I'm sure some people will enjoy hearing more than just the dulcet tones of Doc and Deep. But we will see you next month with our next podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.